Hello, my name's Amanda and this is Suddenly Autistic, the video diary processing stream of consciousness, I suppose, that is me trying to process, share, understand and organise my thoughts around my newfound identity of being autistic. I received my diagnosis when I was 46, so about a year and a half or so ago. And since then, I've been working on not only understanding what it means that I'm autistic, because that information came with a huge relief in some ways of relieving the burden of thinking that all these unlinked, in my mind, problems that I had were actually manifesting out of a single reality, and that's this neurodiversity or developmental difference that I have, the autism. But it's also come with having to re-understand myself, think about my past through this lens, understand my present and how I'm functioning now and what's safe and best for me now, and making plans for my future. So that's me. This video is about a topic that has been close to my heart and has been plaguing my thoughts, ironically, because of the topic, for a while now. I just haven't felt that I'd quite got there, and every video I publish is being the result of quite a lot of investigations and retakes and rethinking. I feel now that I've got closer to understanding this whole concept of overthinking, especially in the context of mindfulness. So I want to explore what I thought overthinking meant, what I now believe it means in a way that's helpful to me, how that relates to mindfulness, a thing that we say and do, and how that manifests in everyday life, and how I believe this new conceptualization of this situation of thinking and actions is going to help me and hopefully other people. I've realised in preparing for this video that it's very common for people, lay people, friends, family, people you meet at work, colleagues, to say, I'm overthinking, meaning and actually mean thinking too much or going above and beyond what is necessary for this task, this time, this situation or circumstance. So that was important for me to realise. But often I found this is the case with me, that a lot of my problems have stemmed from adopting an understanding of a concept that seems to work for everybody else and they're okay with, and don't worry about, but actually causes a problem with me. So the fact that I have so much trouble around this thing called overthinking, and that it seems to make it easier for me when I realise that people often say that when they mean thinking too much, means that in my brain there's a reality that I've thought about overthinking and deconstructed that and put it in its own box versus thinking too much. Not many people would think of that. They'd be like, oh yeah, whatever, and move on. I think about that. That's a clue, and that matters in this context. When friends, family, co-workers have said to me, I'm overthinking that, or I'm thinking too much, they can be meaning that in a judgmental way. In fact, it's usually a judgment. In fact, it is a judgment, let's face it. So making that as a judgment in what they're seeing as my thinking. The judgment saying I'm doing too much, I'm thinking too much in that moment, maybe coming out of concern for me. So it may be trying to protect me from myself, knowing that I have this tendency and that it can derail me and make me tired, etc., etc. It could be coming from a negative position where I seem to know a lot very quickly, it's boring to listen to, I've focused on all these details and now they've got the burden of trying to work out what they're going to use and whatnot. I've given them a problem, or they now feel ashamed that they didn't, they don't know as much and they feel vulnerable. Could be all sorts. So in friends, using the terms interchangeably, saying overthinking when meaning thinking too much, it may or may not have a judgment element to it. It usually does. The judgment may or may not be beneficial to me. That's something that I've really unpacked and unpicked and feel better about now. That sometimes people say something and they're not meaning it the way that I'm meaning it in my concrete box. Often in conversation, and this is probably obvious for neurotypicals, but a lot of things that we say in conversation, and I'm observing the neurotypicals now, they're not meant to be analysed and taken and interrogated. I cannot help but do that. That is not me overthinking, that is me thinking. That is a neutral state. That is not me choosing to put a lot of energy and effort into this because I want to seem intelligent or whatever. Any information I get will not go and be processed in an instinctual way. It will be intellectually processed, and I will think about things and I will pick over the words and construct a meaning. And granted, sometimes I can come up with the wrong or an incomplete definition, such as I did with this overthinking, thinking too much. I've only just realised that could be the case. So one way of conceptualizing this idea that people throw around this thing that you're overthinking is that you're thinking too much for this situation. The judgment can be good or bad. The other way is a therapeutic intervention, the type of intervention you'll have during a therapy session with a psychologist or whatever. You go in and you start talking. You're obviously in some form of distress, or you've got a problem that you're mulling over. It's taking a lot of energy, and so in that case, the thinking is being framed as overthinking in a negative way. This is thinking a lot about something that's not gaining anything. It's looping your thoughts. Things like rumination, catastrophic thinking, worst case scenario, negative self-talk, that kind of thing. It's not going anywhere. It's not constructing. It's not creative. It's not adding any value. In fact, it's taking stuff out of your life and destabilizing you and making you tired. That is what I would like overthinking to be sort of referencing, because that makes a lot of sense to me. If that was the way that everyone referenced it, then I think I'd be told a lot less that I'm overthinking. Therapeutic interventions around thinking styles and patterns and behaviours are there, like I said, to help unpack and deal with and work through the thoughts. And an analogy or a line that sort of resonates with me is hold them, fold them and walk away. It's the Kenny Rogers gambling song, which I'm not really a fan of, but that line works. So in this state, it kind of gives me hope and leads me on to the mindfulness. So in terms of therapeutic, interrogating thoughts that are not adding value, unpacking them, dealing with them and working through them. So holding them is waiting. So creating a pause where you can gather your thoughts and you can become aware of yourself a bit more, and you can start to put a distance between you and these thoughts. You can actually create some space. Folding them is not playing this round. So when a thought comes in, I'm not good enough, I'm running out of time, I haven't got enough money, everyone hates me, the boss is going to sack me because they looked at me this way or they said that word. Learning to understand that these are our patterns, this is what happens when we're tired or stressed or whatever, and that you don't have to play, you don't have to engage with those words. That's another thing. And then walking away is, instead of just bowing out for that round but staying in the game, walking away is leaving entirely, leaving that. And that may or may not be easy to do. It might take some work or whatever, but it's not engaging, full stop. And in my case, that could be around triggers that get me into that headspace. So, for example, if I'm starting to go on negative headspace, overthinking, and I'm with a therapist and I'm talking about it, I might realise that, I'm getting into this loop around politics again and around the environment. I've noticed that I have been reading the news and catching up on social media more than usual. So my walking away will be putting a boundary between that, leaving it alone. I don't need to know everything about that issue at this time. So that's a big one for me, understanding about thinking and overthinking. In terms of going back to friends when they're saying, oh, you're overthinking, you're thinking too much, and the judgment around that, what I have noticed is that it seems normal to me it is normal. It's biologically normal for the brain to want to conserve energy. The brain's a hungry beast. It takes a lot of energy. It makes us very tired if we misuse it. So efficiency is a big thing. The brain likes to work efficiently. Thinking takes a lot of brain power, and so discerning what we think about, being mindful of how many things we take on to get engrossed in, is a skill, is a life skill. It's a valuable skill, and some people are very, very good at conserving their brain power, i.e. not thinking deeply about too many things, or only thinking deeply about one thing at a time when there's a tangible outcome. Like if they do this project, do that research, they're going to get a pay rise, they're going to get a qualification, etc., etc. Me, different story. I love the investigative, I'm curious about the world. I like the investigative nature of thinking and problem solving, puzzling out. I'm drawn to that. So I will think deeply about lots of things that have no net benefit necessarily, other than my enjoyment and my enrichment and maybe my level of understanding of something or ability to create something. So it's for the joy of thinking. That does cost me a lot of energy, and it's sometimes inappropriately timed, in which case those thoughts that would otherwise be quite positive and enriching for my life can interfere with my functioning and then be overthinking, as in not good for me, in which case I still need to go to the therapist and get strategies to manage that. But that's the appropriateness and the way that manifests in time and place. You know, how much time, when is these thoughts coming up? What are they getting in the way of? What are you pushing aside? Is it your nutrition? Is it your sleep? Is it your relationships? What is happening? Are you going and living in this rabbit hole? So it's not necessarily the content or the fact that I like to think deeply about things. It's the way it comes out and is out in the world. We all have our different things we like to think about and we'll think deeply about. We change that from time to time. I would say, in summing up me, I tend, as my norm, to be a deep, thorough, process thinker. I think like I'm doing a school assignment. It doesn't make me wrong or in need of therapy or more mindfulness training, which I'm going to get to. It's just me. Where it becomes a problem is when that's bleeding into and overtaking and getting stuck for me, and then I'm not functioning well in other things, and that can happen. In terms of mindfulness, often when I've put this in and I've linked the two, because in terms of if I'm having negative thought patterns and problems with my thinking around worst case scenarios or misinterpretations or feelings around being not safe in the world and overwhelmed, then often a therapist will go, right, let's do some mindfulness. Let's do it right now. Let's become aware of our bodies in the chair. Let's do some breathing. That rarely works for me. And in fact, I'll go so far as to say it often feels invalidating to me in those moments. Again, this is another penny that's dropped only now, so another thought, another aha moment. There's mindfulness as a theory, how mindfulness works, what it works on, what you're trying to achieve. There's mindfulness as a series of discrete exercises. You're breathing, you're scanning your body, you're touching, whatever you need to do, feeling something, those actions. And there's acting mindfully or being or doing mindful activities, which are much more holistic, like whole body experiences. So mindful theory, again, is not going to help me if I'm in an overthinking to think about, well, how is mindfulness going to work for me? What is going on here? Because it's more thinking. Mindfulness exercises actually may not work for me either, because they're demanding that I pay attention to my body, and as someone with autism, my body attention is not great all the time. Not because I choose not to, but because of things like proprioception, interoception, my sensory awareness, my processing speed, all of that kind of thing. So this is something that I'm naturally disabled at. And so going into that zone, especially when you're in a time of stress and trigger, it's a cognitive load I cannot bear, even though it's meant to be cognitively helpful. What helps me is doing, immersion, getting into, embodying what I should be doing. So, for example, going on a bushwalk, getting in a dark shower, playing some music, doing something like that. And I'm aware that all these things are mindful, but I'm also aware that in a therapeutic session, it's quite common for the therapist to just switch and go, right, okay, let's try breathing now, let's try doing this, or at the end of a yoga session or something else. I cannot switch into that like that. Maybe nobody else can, but it feels not neutral or a little pause or a nice touch. It feels invalidating because it's triggering all the things that I'm not good at and can't do. Mindful thinking is interpreting in the now. How do I feel now? What can I smell now? What can I taste now? Autism is part of autism, a core part of autism, are sensory processing differences, disordered processing, deficits in the way we process, maybe. So for me, I have delays in my processing, so I don't necessarily notice that I'm getting hotter or colder until I'm very hot or very cold, and actually then having sweats or purple fingers. It doesn't help me to become aware of that in the moment because I'm not aware of it anyway until those signals are quite high. So I could pay attention to my fingers and literally watch them go blue, or pay attention to my temperature and literally watch myself get heat stroke and still not move until I did. You know what I mean? Unless I have other options like information, like my Garmin, for example. So with autism, mindfulness, not going to work. Because I'm not sure I'm receiving you. The message is from my body. Mindfulness is demanding that we pay attention to the here and now, to the body, to an embodied self now. Autism means that I have problems understanding myself now, in real time. It takes me some time to get the signals. I need more information than average people. I need a bit more perspective and distance. I perhaps need to take on some more data. Then we've got the trauma. So along with autism, I have my complex PTSD and anxiety, general anxiety disorder, which, as I said in my other videos, I feel are getting better. I'm doing well at working on those. When I'm triggered, or just before I'm getting triggered, or when I'm getting elevated towards a trigger, towards my trauma and anxious brain, this is going into my thought patterns turn to safety first. So if I'm then told to be mindful, it's not going to work again, because if I'm starting to elevate towards distress and we're going to then start focusing on our breathing and noticing our body in the chair as I'm escalating, or ahead of time if I can, it's going to feel to me like somebody's coming in and asking me to sit inside my burning house, just take a few deep breaths and paint your toenails just to give yourself a breather, and then we'll run for it. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. My brain is already thinking about these things. I cannot do that until I feel safe. So the safety first element is going to dominate. I'm not going to be able to get into my body anyway because I have more problems than the average person, especially when I'm triggered in that way. The next layer for me is the ADHD brain, and that comes with executive functioning problems, functioning issues and struggles. In terms of this, I categorise this as my flow brain. So it's got lumpy flow. It's either a flood or a famine. It's all or nothing. It's hyper, thinking, or it's zoning out. Now, it's not quite those extremes, those polars, but that is what happens more and more. So it's like being on a seesaw of these brain chemicals. So if I'm in a flow state, the seesaw's fairly steady. It's like you've got good balance on each side. And I'm just flowing along. Once it starts to get out of balance, it can go down and up and down and up quite quickly, or it can stay down or stay up. So I can stay hyper elevated and have lots of energy, but be a bit chaotic and a bit messy, lose things, knock things over, have that sort of problem. Or it can be down where I lose track of time, zone out every 5 minutes, am writing and forget to add words, stuff like that. Putting me in a position where the way out of this is to feel your body, ooh, the door's slamming, it's going to rain, I think, is not necessarily easy for me because of all the other things, and also because what's the point? My ADHD brain, when I'm told to start breathing, will go, well, I breathe anyway. I'm always breathing. What have I got to do? How do you want me to breathe differently? What's the point of this? Where are we going with it? How long for? Well, I've got to do something else. This is taking time. Time is one of my triggers. Now I'm starting to feel anxious. The other option is a zone out. That's easy for me. Doesn't solve the problem necessarily. Just temporarily, because that is actually my brain giving itself a pause, but it might be inappropriate at that moment. The language we use, I think, around mindfulness, when paired with when used as a strategy for overthinking. If we remember overthinking as a negative, it's the bad thinking, the patterns of thoughts that don't enrich our lives, that make us feel bad. So when we're overthinking, we can use mindfulness. Where it helps me, where I can use it, like I said, is when it's embodied, when it's encouraging and basically directing my attention to my body. Walking as a mindfulness exercise works for me on many levels. Walking in nature is the best form of walking, but walking anywhere, even around the house, can be beneficial, better than sitting still. Why? Because as somebody with autism, I can't feel my body like other people can. I don't read it in real time. If I'm moving though, my body talks to me. So if I'm sitting still, my body will go to sleep. If I'm moving, my body starts waking up. If I'm moving too fast, my body can overwhelm me, like say running. Running doesn't work as well. Or riding a bike through challenging terrain can sometimes be a bit cognitively challenging. But walking is good because it tends to be a fairly easy yet consistent load. I usually am walking somewhere where there's stimulation, but everything's in real time. You can hear the birds, the cars, the breeze, the whatever. Your taste and touch and sound is all relevant. It keeps you in the moment. The environment helps me to stay mindful. Compare that to sitting in a chair in my office. I can feel my chair, I can feel my feet, I can see that I'm sitting a bit awkward, and I can see my spreadsheets. I know my computer's there. I can see the piles. I know that the time's this and I'm losing, it doesn't help. I'm not able to bridge that gap metaphorically. It needs to be literally. This is where the literal part of autism comes in, but not so literal that it's, no, that's the wrong word. Not so deconstructed that it's just the exercises. So mindful exercises, no. Mindful theory, don't need it, no, need it. Mindful activities, yes. That helps me with my overthinking, and it helps me to make a better, more mindful schedule for myself, for my helpful, deep thinking that's not bad, that actually enriches my life. It also helps me stay on track with putting that deep thinking in the right boxes, having it not then railroad and knock me off my schedule or overtake what I need to do, so I forget to cook the dinner or eat or go to bed. So summing up what I found out in this, I found out first of all that overthinking is thrown around in language, and that it sometimes means thinking too much. And sometimes all of that can mean that you're being judged. The way my thinking looks to you may seem bad for you. It may seem like a lot of energy, a lot of effort for nothing. But that is not my reality. This is my reality. Thinking deeply about lots of different things, some of them useful and buildable, some of them not. I will take responsibility, and I am, for going to therapy when I notice, or other people close to me who've got my best wishes at heart are noticing that I'm absorbing myself in things that are not helpful for me, and it's creating these thoughts. The fact that I can, watch a movie and then do the research on the film set, the book, the actors, the whatever, and tell you all of that like 2 days after seeing it, and nobody else has, they just watched the movie and enjoyed it, and oh, whoa, how come you know all of this? That isn't overthinking. That's me enriching and creatively exploring that space and basically making my life fun and interesting and adding value and meaning to my life. So that is not a pathological state or a negative state. Now, if I did that at the expense of my work, yeah, maybe I need some help staying on track, but that's not a therapeutic intervention as such as a lifestyle intervention. That would require something like executive processing support, an ADHD coach, that kind of thing. So pathologizing everything is not ideal. I think that people tend to do that around thinking because most people don't like to think. They like to try and shortcut their thinking. So seeing somebody who enjoys and relishes and runs towards thinking seems alien and confusing, but it's not to me. This is my normal, this is fine, this is healthy for me actually. Even if I go on a mindful bushwalk, take pictures and then come home and look up the flowers and the things, and that seems like, wow, you can't just go on a walk and be in the moment, you have to do this. That is the moment. That is me extending and enriching and exploring and immersing myself in that moment for longer than the moment actually lasts. That is exactly what mindfulness should be. So that's that. I've realised that mindfulness is relational. You can't be someone else's version of mindful. You can't disembody or unpick mindfulness and just reduce it down to exercises. I have to be mindful in a way that's my mindfulness, that suits me, that works with my brain, my biases, my preferences, my reality. Mindfulness has to suit me. I wish sometimes that I had the mindful muscle power and habits of other people who seem to do this easily, but I don't. Mainly because of my autism, my ADHD and the trauma, not because I'm morally I'm a failure, I'm a bad person, I'm shameful, I'm just undisciplined. That is not the case. I also have to respect the fact that I have a disability in understanding and being in my body at the moment. So dissociation, delayed processing, not picking up on signals, are not always because of trauma or anxiety or willful ignorance. They're a disability. I do not have the mechanisms in my body to feed back that information in real time. I need to take more time and I need to think. And of course, all of this confusion makes a perfect storm or a perfect setting for someone like me to think a lot. I've got the mental capacity, I have the difficulties, more difficulties than everyone else does, or not everyone else, of people do, of processing in real time. I've got more than enough reason to think deeply and often, more so than other people. I actually need to. If I didn't, I wouldn't have got this far. I wouldn't have what I have and be who I am. And I quite like that on the whole. Although, yes, there's still some bits I need to work on. Lastly, there's the time, the whole idea that time, we all have 24 hours in a day, yes, but it does take me a long time to process things. Even digestion. Honestly, my husband and I have had a bit of a grumbly stomach the last couple of weeks. He was quite rough, quite sick for like a day or so. Felt bad, kept going to the bathroom, and then he was fine. I grumble along, feeling not quite good, not quite bad, definitely got the same as him, but not, cramping up a bit, but it can take me 2 weeks to process. So that's physically, my physical time of processing that, whatever that was. For him was 2 days or 3 days. For me is like 2 weeks. There's that. But there's also the cognitive processing. I go out for a coffee with a friend for 1 hour. It might take me 3 to 4 hours to unpack, process, and work out my relationship with that. For other people, they go for a coffee for an hour. They've gone for coffee for an hour. The rest of the day's theirs. These are things that feed into that. So time is not the same for me. I don't experience time in the same way that way because it does take me more time to process things. So just to summarise, what has become clear to me is that there's a couple of big themes. Overthinking is different from deep thinking. We throw around words like overthinking and thinking too much without really thinking about what we're saying and what that actually means. I think it would be useful for everybody to think about what it means when they say these things, because if you're being triggered by me thinking deeply about something or coming up with all these new facts very quickly, then that's your problem. And actually that would be quite useful for you to think about rather than put the burden on me and just say to me, oh, you're overthinking. Just because thinking is painful, energetically expensive, and can cause distress, you might learn something you don't want to learn, know something that's uncomfortable, doesn't mean we should avoid it. I don't have a problem thinking in spite of knowing that it could lead to some more pain in some cases or more knowledge I don't need or want. I do it anyway, because the outcome, I'm not trying to control or determine the outcome. I'm investigating. That's what scientists do. That's how I think. Finally, I'm happy to accept overthinking as a negative construct. I'm happy to accept overthinking as something that I do still have a problem with, and I do process in therapy, and I do need mindful exercises in terms of experiences to help manage. And I also accept that my deep thinking is what makes me me, and is so enjoyable. It enriches and expands my life. I love it. There is a time and a place for everything. I do have to gain a little bit more help around some skills, some life skills, so that I don't cause myself these endless problem loops that I tended to get into, but that's for another day. For now, I just like everybody to know that there is a difference between thinking deeply about one or lots of things and overthinking, and that it's not really for other people to judge. Just before I go, I want to communicate thoughts I've had around the origin and the connection, I suppose, between overthinking, this pathological state of thinking too much in a way that's destructive to yourself, and autism, or even that way of thinking and ADHD, as opposed to that way of thinking and trauma and anxiety. I feel from my experience and from thinking about this deeply as I do, that being autistic and or having ADHD doesn't automatically mean that overthinking and these negative thought patterns will be intrusive and disruptive to a person's life to the point that needs therapy or that derails them. I can see how being autistic and or having ADHD can create an environmental situations outside of and inside of an individual that would make it more likely that these things become a problem, or that the attention is such that it directs in that way. But as I said, I don't necessarily feel it's inevitable. On the other hand, I can see that trauma, complex PTSD, and the anxiety are exactly the symptoms of those things, the things that you notice about having those things, the way you know that you have a clinical level of anxiety or trauma, are these intrusive thoughts, these overthinking, basically thinking to a level that it paralyzes and upsets and discombobulates you, whatever the word is. So that is part of the assessment and part of the process. Pairing all that together, I think it seems almost inevitable that I would have ended up with quite a high level of ruminative, negative, or destructive thought processes, and a tendency towards that. However, again, I don't feel that has been my past for sure. That is somewhat my present, but I don't feel wedded to it as a future. I feel that I would have to remain mindful my whole life about my patterns, my lack of ability to process in real time, which comes with the autism, and my brain chemistry, which comes with the ADHD. But I don't necessarily feel that it's, like I said, it's inevitable that these things will always be a problem for me, and that overthinking in this negative way is going to be a thing. I do think that thinking deeply about lots of things that other people can't understand are me, and I'm happy for that. So that's really where I wanted to leave it, to give myself the opportunity to communicate this in a way that, neatens up the edges, so that I can put it away in my brain cupboard a bit, or start to use this new insights and tools. And I wanted to share it in a way that potentially it could help others. If you're having these sort of, if you're triggered by the whole mindfulness thing and feel judged when you're told you're overthinking, and you actually feel, well, that's wrong because these thoughts. And I also want to take a step back and say, even the overthinking thoughts, even the bad thoughts, the rumination, the whatever, they're not inherently, no thoughts are inherently bad, no matter what it is, no matter how terrible it seems to other people, our thoughts are created inside of us by it's our reflection of reality. It's our interpretation. It's what we're primed and what we've chosen and what we're experienced, how we've experienced things. Usually all thoughts have some degree of origin and logic to them. They're leading somewhere, or they came from somewhere, and they might have a lesson for us. But not all thoughts are created equally in terms of their embeddedness in reality and how healthy they are for us to think or to act upon. I think most people understand that, but I just wanted to make that clear that I understand that too, because the video is more for me. But some of my most negative ruminative thoughts have actually been those niggles in my brain that just keep going round and round and round again until I pay attention and work out what's causing it. So that's where, again, therapy can be good, because I feel that needs to be done in a safe, non-judgmental, open space. And often family can't do that for us because they're too enmeshed in the situation. They have their own problems, or they don't have the time, or no inclination, or no skills. So getting a professional to help with that has helped me, and I'm sure it would help other people. But yes, I think it's quite nice to know that I think, therefore, I'm brackets autistic is actually not true. Being autistic, the amount of thinking we do or don't do is separate. They can exist together or not. Thinking deeply about lots of things, or only on occasion when it's necessary or incentivized, it is what it is. That seems pretty rational to me. But that doesn't mean that my way of thinking is irrational. It's just different. Thank you for listening. I hope this has been at least a little bit interesting and worthy of your time. Hope to see you again soon.